Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we will be looking how to create a dynamic Angular components with this library. This library I have created and it's very useful to create a different component. If you don't want to write a lot of codes and if you want to have some JSON type of structure to create the components, you can use this library. So this library is depend on Angular Material from Google and Tailwind CSS. So you need to have Tailwind CSS installed and Angular Material to use this library. So on this GitHub link, you can see one demo over here. So if you click to the demo, there are lots of components over here. So whichever components it's best required for you, we can use that component. For example, this is auto completion text. So if you write something, and on this documentation, on this demo, you can see a code button over here, and if you click on that code button, so it will give you a HTML and TS file of that code. So whatever this component is using, all its codes are here. So basically these are all the designs for the top one. So what is the basic component for this one is from here, form to form. So you can see a control builder, and here we are passing a child as a layout control configuration and form group. So if we check a TS file of this one, and here inside the constructor we have a defined form, and in the defined form we have defined how the component should be worked. So this is an autocomplete component, so it's autocomplete, and it requires a form control name because it is using all reactive components. So in this library, it is not a template driven one. So if you are using a template driven Angular application, this will not work. This is only work for reactive form builders. So if you are using reactive, then this library is best suited. So for autocomplete, we are saying a form control name will be this, what will be the label and placeholder and options. These are the values that the auto completion will use. So this is the basic code for you, and you don't need to write a lot of codes. In the HTML side, if you can see over here, there is only this line of code that generates all this component. So I have written only 3 lines of code, and it will generate 3 components for me. And how they are all defined, they are defined over here. So whatever you give, whatever the basic properties you give on this one, based on those properties, it will create a component. So let's see how we can use this library in our application. Now let's have a look on Angular application. So this is a basic Angular application which is using a version 15, which is the latest one. And in this demo, I have used standalone component, which is the latest feature from Angular 15. So if I check mine main.ts file, and if we go to the documentation of that library, so if we come back to this one, and they have written how to use this one in your application. So if you are not using a standalone component, and if you are using a ng module concept, then you need to have inside the ng module as Falcon core module.forRoots. But if you are using a standalone component, now you need to change something in the main.ts file, because module files will not be there on a standalone component. So on this application, in the main.ts, I have provided a input provider form. This is the new API from Angular 15, and I passes the Falcon core module.forRoots.environments. Now you need to pass our environment file for this one, because it is using a lot of configurations that is defined in the environment files. So for in this one, we need to include that Falcon core module in the main.ts file. However, if you are using with the ng modules, then you need to add in the ng modules for that one. So once you import that one, and for this one, I have already mentioned that it requires an Tailwind CSS and Angular Material. So you need to have a Tailwind CSS to be installed and Angular Material to use, because all the components, the input, all the search, all the cards, they are being used from the Angular Material. and Tailwind CSS is used for layouting the application. So if you want to use the layout, if you want to divide a section into grids or any left align right element, that's all been used from the Tailwind CSS. But all the components like input box, search box, select box, they are all from the Angular material. So let's see how we can use this library. So I have included that one in that main.ts file, or this one. And if I go to one of the forms that I have used in the form.html to create a component, so what we are creating over here, if I run this application, so if I check that form.ts file, say I have a login form which consists of username, password, and a submit button. For all this to work, just this is the card you can see from Angular material, and these are the outer designs for that one, and these are from the Tailwind CSS, so making a center. So if you see over here, this is coming in the center. This is because of that Tailwind CSS, and this card is from Angular material. For that one, these HTMLs are being used. But yeah, all the other components, that this text box, username, password, and button, this all been driven by this 3 line of code. In this 3 line of code, we are telling that we need 3 components. How? If you go to the TS file of this one, on this library, you need to extend this base component of these components. If you extend this base component, it will give you a 3 property. One is a define property, and another one is submission property. So once you submit, what should you happen? All the submission data will become to this method, and how you need to define a form. So there are the 2 abstract method of this class. So you need to extend that one. So once you extend that one, in the constructor you need to call this method. On this method, I am saying I need a text box. So this is the text box of type, and there are different types. So if you go back to here, it will see there are the types. So this is the text box types I have used, but you can use many other types. So over here I can see text area, select backgrounds, all those components are available from that library. So you can use one of these. So because in my scenario I needed a text box, so I have used that one. So I'm telling my control builder to create a text box of form control name, because this works with the reactive form controller. So it requires a form control name, and we are saying a label to display on the top. Values, what value should. Now some of the forms might require validations, and we want to perform validations because these are all dynamic form controller. So in the HTML there won't be any validations. All the validations you have to do is inside the define form, however you are defining the form. So when you define it on, there is another property called validations. Now this validations works with Angular all validations, or you can also use a custom validations. For here there is custom validations, that all validations are there on this demo. If you check this demo, so if I go to the input, see floating label, hints, error message. Now this is a required validations that is been done from that library, and this is a pattern validation. Sometimes you need to use a regex for this one, so you can use a regex for this one also, and require plus pattern. And if you want to use some custom validation, this is for custom validations. So on this custom validations, I have done like no space is required. So if you check the code over here, you can also check the same code. So if you click on the TS file and HTML file, it will give you the code. So if I come back to here, see validations, we are doing a validations property and validations, and we are giving a pattern. So you can also pass a pattern. Now if you are doing a custom validation, see, cannot contain space. This is one of the validations that you need to use and define over here. And if you pass this one, this all works. So we have done the same thing, but this is a simple form that login. We required a text box. I'm saying a text box of username label and text box of password. Now for the password, we want to have an asterisk. So when we type on the password, so this should come asterisk. So how will you define an asterisk? So by default, all the components are text type. So if you don't define a type of anything, it will be a text type. But if you define a text type of password, it is overriding that one, and it's saying again on this one I'm doing a require validations, and there is another component that's saying button. On the button one I'm just giving a submit button, that's it. So once we do that, so if I check this one, if I press, those validations are there. So if I refresh again, validation comes. If I press this one, validations are there, and if I type something, that validations goes away. And then if your form is, and if I submit a form, all the values will come to here. Now from here you can do a server side things after the form validations. So this library is very useful if you don't want to write a lot of HTML code. So based on this line of codes, it has generated all this form for you and done the validations for you. So it's very useful. Have a look on this library, and if you like this library, hit a like button for this library and subscribe to my channel.